This next person that is going to speak for about 10 minutes is a retired Whittier police officer and great Broadway-esque singer, and just a really great guy. Family member, my brother-in-law, John Scoggins, and he has an amazing story. And I know he probably won't be able to get to all of it, but it is an amazing story of what God can do in someone in their health, going through some really difficult things. He's had a heart transplant, and he'll tell you more about that in just a minute. Come on up. John Scoggins.
Good morning, and thanks for having me today. Thanks for putting on this event. What a great opportunity for us to share information and create some networking and get back to the Word of the Lord as well. So I know that I think a lot of the focus here today has been on cancer, but Stage4 Ministries also focuses on lots of other medical issues. And we certainly have that in common in the fact that I'm actually a double transplant recipient. 6 years ago, I received both a heart and kidney. And I went through probably the biggest fight of my life that I wasn't expecting. So how it started was I had to go in for what they call a routine aortic valve replacement, if there is such a thing, but that's what they called it. And it didn't go according to plan. And so the initial surgery went really well, so they thought. I was on my way back to recovery when I suffered a massive heart attack. And it basically killed the left side of my heart almost instantly. And they had to wheel me back into surgery right away. My heart had stopped beating, so they cut my chest back open. And the doctor was actually massaging my heart to keep the blood and oxygen flow pumping into through my body and through my organs to keep me alive until they can put me on forms of life support. And on that life support, I stayed for almost 2 months. But initially, they put me on what they call the ECMO machine, which helps pump the blood through your body. I got put on an Impella device, which keeps your heart beating in a proper rhythm. I was on oxygen. I was on a tracheostomy. I was on every possible thing you can imagine that was keeping me alive. And I had a lot of close calls. And about 3 weeks later, because I was in an induced coma that entire time, I finally woke up in the hospital, had no recollection of what had happened, why I was even there. And what I first remember was looking up and seeing my wife's beautiful face smiling down at me. And she says, "John, you're in the hospital, but you're okay." And over time, I eventually asked the question, though I couldn't speak, she had to read my lips because of the trach. I said, "Was I shot?" Being a police officer, I thought, if I'm going to be in the hospital fighting for my life, it must have occurred on the streets. And she said, "No, you think you were shot?" I said, "Look at me." And she said, no, you had heart surgery and you're here recovering. And so she explained everything to me, kind of settled my mind, and I figured out, okay, so I've got a different fight that I have to attend to. And during this time, I had so many close calls, ups and downs. Every day was a different procedure. Every day was another guess. The doctors said that basically they didn't know how I was still here, that they were basically reacting to how my body was responding, and they were just keeping me stabilized until they figured out a plan to ultimately save my life. And so as I went through different procedures, they were trying to figure out why I was bleeding here. They were draining my lungs from pneumonia. Other organs were shutting down. I was losing my liver. I had lost my kidneys. I started to get put on dialysis. And I was literally just knocking on death's door. And like I said, the doctors actually started referring to me as their miracle man, because up to that point, they really had no idea how I was still here. But I was. And they finally figured out, okay, one of the only things that we can do to probably save him is to do the transplants. And so they put me on the list. Now, in order to prepare for that, I had to start receiving physical therapy, because I had literally withered away to almost nothing. I'd lost about 30% of my body weight. I was down to about 122 pounds, starting at about 175 at the time. And my body was literally eating itself, and I was very weak. I almost felt paralyzed in my own body. I was that weak. In fact, physical therapy referred to me as a wet noodle, because as soon as they sat me up, I'd flop right back down. And to this day, ramen still is not very appetizing to me. But they started preparing me for that. And I'll never forget this, because it seems like it was yesterday to me. It was either a day or two after Christmas, December of 2019. The physical therapy came in, and they stood me up in preparation. And as soon as they did, I immediately felt that heaviness on my chest. I couldn't breathe, and it was another heart attack. And they laid me back down, and I heard all the alarms and going off on all my equipment, and I knew it wasn't good. And but the next thing, the best way I can describe it is it was like organized chaos. Within a matter of seconds, there was probably a dozen doctors and nurses and staff in my room, and they were working like a well-orchestrated beehive. They all had a job. They knew what they were doing. And even my doctor, my thoracic surgeon, just so happened to walk on the floor at that very moment. And as he came into the room, I thought, oh, there's my doctor. And then I hear, he has no pulse, begin CPR. And I thought, oh, are they talking about me? And before I could even finish that thought in my mind, I'm receiving chest compressions. And my first thought was, I started to pray, and I said, please don't let this hurt. My sternum still hadn't healed from the previous procedures. And miraculously, I didn't feel a thing in that moment. I didn't feel like I was in any distress at all. But I was witnessing everything that was happening. And I have no doubt that God's hands were on everybody's shoulders. He orchestrated everything perfectly that day. And as I'm receiving chest compressions, I'm watching it switch from the right side of my bed to the left side of the bed between different nurses. And finally, in about the fourth cycle, on the left side, I see one of my male nurses. His name was Alex, that I had had several times. He had taken care of me before. I'd been in there for almost 2 months at this point. And we make eye contact. And you imagine he's giving chest compressions to me. He looks down at me and he goes, he's awake. The doctor then gives out an order to sedate me, and I knock out pretty quickly. And I wake up sometime later, and I'm stable. And I ask the doctors, how is it possible? I mean, number one, I'm alive, but how did I witness that? And again, the way that they explained it, and the way that I know to explain it, is that God had orchestrated it, that everybody that needed to be there at that time were in the right place at the right time, some just right outside my room. The doctor had just walked up. As soon as he came in, my heart stopped beating. They were able to provide CPR so quickly that I still had enough oxygen in my blood that as they circulated the blood, I remained conscious. They said it's very rare, but it does happen. And though that was traumatic to witness that occurring, it was also a blessing, because I got to see God's miracles work, and so did the doctors, and so did all the staff. And as I recovered, it did a few things. Number one is it brought the attention to the doctors that I needed to be put on the top of the transplant list. I wasn't going to last much longer, so I got put to the top of the list. And it also allowed me to talk to the doctors and the staff, because even they were asking me questions like, how are you still smiling? How are you still telling jokes? How are you still in this position? And I could just point up and say, because I have hope. And a lot of times they would shake their head, they would accept, they would understand. And many times they would stop and they would stay and actually tell us their stories, even family members that were visiting. And they would share their testimonies and beliefs. And so God was using me through that time, and he still is. So long story short, I get put to the top of the transplant list, and that came with a lot of emotions, because I knew in that moment, as happy as we were that I was going to get a second chance, we also knew that someone was going to die in order for me to live. And that, my friends, is a story for another day, because that's a whole other element of a transplant recipient's life. And what I want to leave you with today, because I only know I have another minute or two, is the fact I'm often reminded of the Apostle Paul. And something that we're all going through is that there is strength in weakness. And if you permit me for a moment, I'll read very briefly from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest in me. So when I was at my weakest, Jesus met me right there. And I had no doubt that he was by my side. He didn't leave me. He didn't forsake me. And I knew, and I still know to this day, that whatever his will was, if he was going to take me, if he was going to leave me for a purpose, that I was okay with it. And he's already given me an extra 6 years. If he's with me tomorrow, every good life. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunity that he's given me for the extra 6 years and how much longer he has planned for me. And I want to be able to share my testimony with many people like him. And on that last note, this is actually the very first time I've shared this statement in the public setting. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity. And I wish each and every one of you the best. May God bless you. And thank you so much for that.